7 years ago, nearly 8. So it's a long time ago. The book needs updating. What a lot's happened since 2008, all the changes. I just want to talk a little bit about the way that the inquiry went, the commission process went, because I think it was remarkable in many ways. I've not been part of an inquiry. I was party to running an inquiry recently for London Region of Unite, the union, a people's inquiry, in which we took evidence around London. But the sessions that took place for this Mansfield Commission were remarkable in that they took written depositions, and then they had almost like a judicial process where there's no actual Bibles and oaths taking shape, but actually people were asked questions and guided through by a barrister. And we went to great lengths to try to ensure that all the people who could contribute on both sides of the argument actually were invited and offered the full opportunity to present their views. And repeatedly we went to the SaHF team and to the CCGs and asked them to participate and to make sure they sent witnesses. We were absolutely impressed by the witnesses we received, but of course we didn't see any of them until after the election had taken place in May last year. And then suddenly we had a group of them turned up. And what was remarkable was the contrast between the detail, the specifics, the attention to, and the feel that you got from the local people, the various campaigners and activists that came along and gave their opinions and their information in evidence. That's a marvellous mobile phone sound. And we got a great attention to detail, a great care expressed for the hospitals and for the services that people were eager to defend. In contrast, we got an absolutely astonishing series of evasions from the NHS witnesses when they appeared. And that has really characterised the information that we've had throughout this process from them. We went to see if we could take it higher, to see if we could get a more coherent approach to this by seeking a meeting with NHS England. This was actually NHS England London office we were constantly pushed to. So we couldn't get to meet Simon Stevens. He said, oh no, the people you want to talk to are NHS England's London office. Who are NHS England's London office? Well, it's led by Anne Rainsbury, the woman who was locally the person that drew up the initial formula for SaHF in the first place. So it was kind of a circular query, and we couldn't get to see them until long after the full, the basic inquiry report had been largely drafted. And we got to see them, and one of the questions we asked them was about how much it was now expected to cost. And this was where this figure of £1.3 billion came from. And we said, well, okay, well, where's that written down? Oh, we're working on a business case. And this was the late summer of last year. I think it was September of last year we finally got to see them and to get this information. By which point, much of the other information that we had was already starting to date a little bit, and we were concerned about that. Oh, so we said, well, when will this business case be? Oh, well, it'll be soon. It'll be soon. The business case will be soon. So we actually held, and the reason this inquiry report was so late and delayed was precisely because we gave them every opportunity to give us information, and we still haven't got it. We still don't know. There is still no published business case. And this is now, so long after the decision was made to go ahead. So I do think this is important. We have gone to great lengths to try to make this as open and inquiry. People know where I stand, right? I have a long history of campaigning on this question, okay? But I was, as part of the commission, very keen to see that we dealt with all of the information that came in, and we dealt with it accurately and with rigour. And that's what we would have loved to have done had NHS England graced us with the information that we asked them for, but they've still not provided it. And I also want to say that one of the great things that they keep talking about is that this process is clinically led. Right? Clinically led. This is the big thing. It's clinically led. It's not financially led, it's clinically led. It's all about clinical results. But actually, we still don't see any evidence that the clinicians on the ground actually support this. Or the clinicians on the ground, in many cases, are even fully aware of what the implications are of this. And I have a challenge today to the CCGs and to the SaHF project team, which apparently is still in existence in actually quite a palatial suite of offices in central London, right? I have a challenge to them. Ballot now the GPs across northwest London, telling them what they have to do over this SaHF. Ballot them now, and you will not have permission to go ahead unless you get 50% to participate in the ballot, and the same percentage they want trade unions to get in order to get. Going on to the findings of the Commission, I think Stephen has touched on a number of the aspects of it very well, and I'm not going to duplicate that, but just to read out the key findings, and it is worth reading the whole report, by the way. This is a long document, but it's not like a health authority document or a CCG or a SaHF document. There is some hard facts in there and some clear conclusions in there, and some evidence which is actually significantly lacking from the SaHF proposals. And the key findings are, first of all, there is still no updated business plan in place. Now, can you imagine billions of pounds £1 billion+ they want to spend with no business plan? You know, you couldn't run a whelk stall without a business plan without going to NatWest Bank or whatever. You get laughed out of court. This is just crazy. And secondly, there has been limited and inadequate public consultation on the SaHF proposals. In fact, the consultation took place on proposals which are very different from what they're now proposing to do. So they have no mandate. They have no public acquiescence. In fact, they had no mandate in the public meetings they held on it either, because again and again, wherever they went, they found, wherever people had heard of the meetings and were there, that they were against these proposals. So there is no mandate of acceptance, and there is no legitimate argument that this was adequately consulted on. Thirdly, the escalating cost of the programme does not represent value for money. It's a waste of precious public resources. And I'll go on a little bit more about that in a moment. Then also that the NHS facilities delivering important public health care services have been closed already without adequate alternative provision being put in place. Now we already know that because the two A&Es went and collapsed A&E performance in northwest London. It went from one of the best in the country to one of the worst, and it's stayed that way ever since because the resources and the services were not there. As everybody who knew anything about it told them before they closed those units. They closed them, and one of the other recommendations we are making is that they should both be reopened.
Yes.
And it also, the report also points out that the original business case, which is now a historic document, actually it should be in a museum rather than actually used, but it isn't actually a basis for any actual action being proposed. Apart from the closures of the hospitals. The original business case seriously underestimated the increasing size of the population in northwest London and future plans which we know about now and which we've drawn attention to, and they keep saying they're going to adjust and accord, but they still haven't done it. And this is absolutely crucial. What is the point of designing plans now that are going to be implemented over the next few years, that are going to be out of date by 2020, more out of date in 2025, but even more out of date for the generation after that? This is ridiculous. Because what we're on, as I think Stephen pointed out, and the two Stephens have pointed out, it's a one-way process. You close a hospital now, it becomes a housing development, you can't put it back again. It's gone. Once it's gone, it's gone. There is no way back. Once you close a resource like Ealing Hospital, a resource like Charing Cross, these are big, massive national assets. Once they're broken down into flats and Malmaison hotels, whatever it might be, you're not going to get them back. So this is really important. You only get one chance to get this right, or in this case, one chance to get it wrong, and actually wreck services for the long term. So the major recommendation was, again, the SaHF programme needs to be halted, and that local authorities should consider seeking judicial review of the decision to implement the programme. So in other words, I do think that's important as well. This has not gone away. It's no better now than it was. In fact, in many respects, it's worse. So I just want to work on for a few other things that have taken shape more recently. Because it's clear that SaHF was supposed to save money. It was argued in the context of a £1 billion gap between resources and pressures on services. And they had to address that gap. And although it's supposedly clinically led, it was supposed to save money. Well, it clearly doesn't save money, £1.3 billion. But would they even get £1.3 billion? Look at what's going on right now. Look at what trusts are being told, unless they clear their existing deficits, they will not get access to the extra money next year, which is built now as a transformation fund. How much is in that fund for the whole of the country? £1.8 billion. Right? Do we really seriously believe this completely, back of the fag packet plan that's now being presented, that's been changed every 6 months, rather like my clothing needs to be expanded as I put on weight, right? Do we really seriously believe that plan is going to command sort of whatever it is, 60-70% of the entire national pot of investment from the NHS? No, it's clearly not going to do that. So the money isn't there. It doesn't even matter how good some of these pilot schemes are. There's no money to make them work on a broader basis. It doesn't matter how brilliantly you can prove some very small scale scheme works. If you throw in extra resources, divert staff into it and run it as a one-off experiment, that's not the way you can roll services out. There is no evidence any of these pilot schemes can be rolled out across broader layers of North West London. So this is completely irresponsible. Not only is it questionable whether it's value for money if you have the money, you haven't got the money anyway, so it's not going to happen. Right? So this is really, really seriously important. We've also got the actual situation of the local trusts. We've got the Imperial Trust, 25 million currently in the red from the latest figures I've seen, 25 million and rising. We've got the London North West Hospitals Trust, 76 million and rising. That's over £100 million in deficits by December of the last year, with more to come until the end of the financial year. That's deficits of the two main trusts, right? These hospitals can't run on the money they're being given by the CCGs. The CCGs are now trying to reorganise to take money further away from those trusts and make their situation even less viable. This again is crazy, crazy way to try to organise services, and irresponsible and putting services at risk. As is, of course, the demand from the NHS that they clear those balances in order to access any extra money. You're already deep in a hole, you've got to dig a bit deeper before you're allowed to climb out. How does that happen? How does that happen? The King's Fund reckons to save £1 million, you've got to sack 25 nurses. Well, how many nurses do you need to sack to save £75 million? Do the sums, God knows what that is. The average trust in England is £15 million in the red, by the way. But that's 375 nurses, so 5 times that would be for £75 million. You can't do it, it can't be done. You can't cut your way out of this. This actually indicates these services are desperately underfunded. These are not inefficient hospitals, they're underfunded hospitals, under-resourced for the needs and the requirements of local populations. The local CCG should be banging the drum for the resources they need to deliver services, not looking for ways of cutting back the hospitals they've currently got. They've forged ahead with the closure of the maternity unit at Ealing, and now we're getting knock-on impacts on the maternity units either side, just as we did when the casualty units, the A&Es closed at Central Mid and in Hammersmith. It's predictable. It happens every time. These are not replaced services. These are services that are cut. Now they're coming for the paediatrics in Ealing. Now they're whittling it away until there won't be enough left to be able to justify keeping the whole hospital open, and then the bulldozer will move in and close down half the site and turn it into housing. Probably bulldoze the whole lot and rebuild a little clinic on the corner. Now this is just crazy. And then they'll come to Charing Cross, and then they'll start whittling it away until the world-leading stroke unit is not sustainable at Charing Cross. And then they say we can't sustain that because we can't staff it, because there's not enough other supporting services, so we'll have to move that away. That's the way it'll work. They'll probably do Ealing first, and then move in then on Charing Cross. Well, we have to take a stand. We have to say no, none of these cutbacks is acceptable. We want the maternity. we've got a campaigner who attends the Ealing meetings. I don't know if he's here, Colin Stanfield, and he does some absolutely magic graphs showing the A&E performances in northwest London. And his graphs actually used to tease out the Ealing Hospital and the northwest London hospitals, and now of course they're merged into one trust. It's very difficult to tease out the differences. But what you can see is the London Northwest Hospital has gone the same way, as dragging Ealing down with it, making Ealing look like it's underperforming, when in fact Ealing is handling cases very efficiently, and it's the Northwick Park end of the equation that's failing. And it's failing because it doesn't have the resources. It's dealing an unacceptable caseload because Central Mid and Hammersmith have gone. So, you know, this again was utterly predictable. And it's unacceptable because the only reason the performance figures even look as good as 75% of people dealt with within 4 hours instead of 95% is because they're bracketing together the most minor cases, the type 3 cases, with the type 1 cases, the most serious cases, who need admission and hospital beds. And they've sandwiched those results together, and it looks more respectable, because you've got to be a complete idiot not to be able to run a minor injuries unit within 4-hour turnaround. But it's much more complicated to run a full-scale A&E with all the complicated demands and pressures of admitting people with serious injuries and serious health problems. That's a completely different thing. So you merge them together, it looks like you're performing slightly better than you are. But the type 1s are the most important. Why have we had all this management time spent on trying to divert minor cases away from A&E into undefined services somewhere else, when actually the reality is we should be channeling the resources into the people who are most seriously ill? And we had again and again in the inquiry people pointing out the confusion that's been created between these urgent care and A&E units. You know, you're supposed to self-diagnose. You probably saw the other day Jeremy Hunt suggesting people not knowing how to diagnose a different rash should Google the difference between a meningitis rash and a normal and a nappy rash or something. Honestly, are we really going to have the NHS run do-it-yourself on Google? Is that the way that the government wants to do this? And you know, we can't do that, but that's the way it is. You've got to decide, am I not really a very serious emergency, in which case I can go to a minor injuries unit, a long way away from a full-scale hospital, or am I not going to take the chance and I'm going to go to the proper A&E unit, and if I'm minor, then they can take care of me there as well. That's a perfectly logical way for people to go. Why will the NHS not accept that? Makes perfectly good sense. It's the most efficient way to run the services. It's the most effective way to run the services, and it's the one that the public understands. And instead they're trying to make water flow uphill and get people to self-diagnose themselves with potentially very dangerous consequences if you wind up in the wrong place. Now, we don't want that happening here. We don't want any more of that. Urgent care centres have a place as long as they're next to an A&E. Yeah? No problem with that. Community-based services are brilliant as long as they run alongside adequate hospital care for the people that need it. Got no problem with that. Primary care is essential as long as it runs with all the backup that the GPs need, so that when the patients are too ill to be cared for at home, they can be cared for where they need to be cared for. We're not opposed, from the inquiry report, to any of these changes taking place as an improvement and a development on what we've got. What we are opposed to is shutting down hospitals on a vague promise that sometime in the future somebody else will. I just want to wind up by reading out one of the vaguest sentences I've ever seen in any document. And this is from the update on progress with shaping a healthier future. This is November 2015 from the SaHF team, a briefing pack. And I quote you from page 12. Now just see how many evasions are on this one sentence, okay? Currently across northwest London, approximately 10,000 admissions are for ambulatory care sensitive conditions. In other words, conditions that might be treated within in an urgent care centre, right? Might be, okay? And we believe many of these can be cared for by alternative care. Now, how many evasions are there in that? Right?
6.
I believe for every drop of rain that falls, I plan a health service on that? No. Should they? No. This is not an adequate plan. It treats patients and local residents in this whole area of North West London with contempt. It refuses to give information. These people have been dishonest and deceitful, and they need to be brought to book. And we do need, through whatever means the councils can continue to bring to bear, whether that be health and scrutiny panels continuing to object and to protest about changes, whether it be through judicial review where possible of irrational decisions taken on inadequate information, whichever way that can be done, that this fight has to go on, because they can only win once, we can only lose once. We have to fight this one now, or we lose our election.